The subject across from me is relaxed in a way practically no subject ever or before has been. Most people are a little nervous, or at least excited, to tell their story. The man across from me has a sincere boredom in his eyes. I could tell he has had to tell this story many times. I don't know if he's agreeing to share his story because he agrees with me that the story needs to be told, or if he just wants me to stop bothering him. I suspect it is a mixture of both. We sit in the National City Saloon, famous for their authentic sarsaparillas that still only cost a bit. I can tell from his expression when he drank the sarsaparilla that it was the taste he was familiar with. He examines me and he knows if I can do my homework and get a saloon that still serves authentic sarsaparilla, then I was someone who could share the story authentically. He took one more look around the saloon before he removed his wide-brimmed hat, and I can see his shoulders slump. Like for the first time in years, or even decades, he can finally relax as he begins to speak with me authentically. You know that places that try to be historically accurate always miss? He asked me before he answered his own question. They miss the crap, and they miss the dirt. Anything that makes the past look even a little bad, they paste it over with whitewash and bullshit, and they pretend the bullshit doesn't stink. You get an authentic saloon, barmaid clearly doesn't have syphilis. They're serving everyone when a century ago neither you nor I would have seen the inside of a saloon unless we were cleaning it. The food they served you was more likely to kill you than getting shot, and you had two choices for drinks: get drunk or get the shits. He takes another swig from his sarsaparilla and he sighs. At least they got the taste right, although I'm betting they now pasteurize every fucking thing. Wish we had that when I was growing up, but yeah. If they were really going for authenticity, they'd coat everyone in crap and let them fester. No one wants that history. They want the bullets, lassos, and horseback riding. When I was first getting started, it wasn't cowboys and Comanche that killed us. It's those fucking figures in black that fucked up our town and fucked up my life too. Now, if you want to hear about that, you're going to hear all of it. My parents moved to New Foundry from the Middle Kingdom decades before I was born. They moved because they heard that there was plenty of work and wealth in the Sunset Republic. They were right about the work, they were wrong about the wealth. My grandfather started in the foundry by loading buckets full of iron scrap. He worked his way up to foreman. My grandmother started by working in the brothel, and she died a madam, blind in one eye, and she passed on syphilis to three of her children. My mother was lucky enough not to catch the damn clap. My father was a homesteader who came from the Seven Cities who was promised some land out west for just moving out there. You can imagine the fucking irony of my mother working her ass to the bone to afford an eave above the fucking saloon. Then my dad moved out, and being white and an imperial, he was given a fucking acre and a herd for free. I'm pretty sure he married her because he was single, straight, and horny, and I'm definitely certain that she married him because he owned land and he was easy to please. Sadly, she passed not long after my birth, some bullshit infection. Whether it came from the whorehouse, the food, the fucking water, or a paper cut from counting her cash, it did not fucking matter. She was dead, and she was dumped into the hole with the others, and I was raised by my father, only ever seeing my grandfather and grandmother in town as strangers who did a service for everyone else. I don't know what name my mother gave me. If my dad knew it, he wouldn't bother to tell me. I was always just Claudius Clyde to him. He gave me his name, and when I turned 16, I could pick my cognomen, which would be Charon. But that would be so much later. From my dad, I learned horseback riding, I learned how to shoot, and I even learned how to hunt. I had a few different choices of what I could do as a profession. The land I could inherit from my dad guaranteed prosperity for me when most didn't, so I had a chance to try new things. So, the first profession I wanted to do to get away from my father and my family in town, I decided to become a bounty hunter. In those days, the treaties and negotiations between nations were tenuous at best, and criminals took advantage of those treaties and limited resources to escape and try to live prosperous lives. So naturally, it led to the profession of bounty hunter. They could capture the criminal and bring them back to the government that wanted them. My first bounty I caught? Tax evader who left Triple Alliance land with hundreds of thousands of quatchly. When I found him and the gun was pointed, he was eager to show me where he kept the chests of money. Turning him into the Triple Alliance got me paid, but not nearly as much as the chests. The advantage, though? I wasn't going to be chased down by other bounty hunters. Still, though, it helped me earn a good reputation as an honest bounty hunter. A lot of bounty hunters earned reputations for being rougher than the criminals they fought. Some of them, I could tell you for certain, would be bank robbers if they didn't discover bounty hunting first. And other hunters heard the term dead or alive and never learned to read past the first word. My reputation for being honest didn't just help me with the marshals, the sheriffs, and the officers. It also helped me with the criminals I was catching. More than once, I would run across them with my gun at hand who could just surrender because they know if they escaped me, they would run across worse bounty hunters. I was hardly rich doing bounty hunting, but it was fun, and I could go further than I would have normally, and I could make choices about my life that practically no other job could have done. If I wanted to work on the railroad, I'd be working from dawn until dusk. If I worked for the sheriff, I would be doing so much paperwork, and I wouldn't be paid nearly as well. And if I stayed home working on the homestead, then I'd be bored half the time and working my ass off the other half the time. As a bounty hunter, I could sleep in if I want to, or I could stay up late if I wanted to. The money I was making was stored in a bank my father owned, and I had little to worry about. I was happy. I saw new sights, I met new people, I even got to fire my guns a few times, usually to fight off bandits or to take down the charges that tried to kill me. I tried to bring them in alive, but if it came down to me or them, I chose me. I loved my world at that time. I was catching criminals and I was making Aslan a little safer. I know a lot of people love those tragic heroes who struggle against impossible odds and who fight a never-ending battle that never gets easier. Except for me, during those 3 years, I saw things get safer and safer. Bank robbers, murderers, tax evaders, bail jumpers, or contract breakers were getting caught, and as I had less and less contracts, I became certain that I would be able to retire peacefully in my homestead. I would have my adventure and stability, the imperial dream for me. One night, though, I found out that the world I have been exploring was so much smaller than I thought it was. I had a bounty for a killer that had been hopping from country to country, nation to nation. He was wanted in Europa, the Seven Cities, the Kingdom of Vespucci, Tejas, Triple Alliance, Danita, and about 13 other countries, all of whom were offering massive bounties for proof of his death. A very rare bounty, where every country would pay for the bounty upon confirmation of death. Typically, if a criminal was wanted in multiple countries, the country that got the body, or who arrested the criminal, would pay the bounty. This time, though, everyone was willing to pay for his death or capture. This job was so high paying that it would be worth more than my last 3 years of work, and it would have been worth 300 normal bounties. He even had killed at least 4 bounty hunters, and he had accumulated hundreds of deaths across 2 continents. And even now, I still remember his name. Back in Rome, he was known as Tiberius Tybalt, but everyone knew him better by his cognomen, Grim. Grim's location was well known by that point. He was clearly making his way west, but he was trapped in the Grey Mountains for the winter, in a small cabin in the mountains, not far from where the Donner Reed party had met their unfortunate end. So I began my trek to his cabin, and even knowing where it was hard to get to, just from how cold the winters were back then. Yes, I can tell you for certain, the winters were a hell of a lot colder back then. By the time I made it to the cabin, it was strange. Grim had set up numerous totems around his cabin, but they weren't any totems I could recognize. I have seen all kinds of totems, fetishes, crosses, and other esoteric and religious bullshit over my years. They're very popular in Aslan, but these were strange. They were the remnants of children's dolls. The heads were removed and the body was tied to the bare trees. And as I passed by each doll body, it was unnerving because even though the dolls' heads were missing, I felt like the dolls followed me as I made my way towards the cabin. It was a wooden cabin with a stone foundation and a squat circle of stones that surrounded the cabin. When I got closer, I noticed that the stones had traces of silver and salt in them, a very unusual stone choice, and one that I imagine cost Grim a lot of money. Before I crossed the line, I paused and I heard a little voice in my head. A voice that told me to kick some of the stones away so I could walk without stepping over the stones. Once that was done, I stepped closer to the cabin still and I saw another oddity of Grim's. Inscribed over his door in red paint, designed to look like blood, was a phrase written in Argivian. Hades is not welcome here, it said as I approached the cabin door, and I knocked twice. When there was no answer, I knocked twice again, and this time the door opened into a dark cabin. I took a moment to wait and see if Grim would act. What I saw instead was a man in a rocking chair in the corner, smoking his pipe when he saw me. He took one look, and, bored, he went back to his pipe. You're here to kill me? Fine. Just let me finish this pipe first, please. Feel free to come in, just close the door behind you. It's cold, Grim said as I closed the door behind me. He did not look like how I expected. He had gray eyes, a gray beard, and a big belly that made him look more like the Winter Man than a desperado. He didn't even have a hat on him. I stood across from him, my gun pointed at him, and still, Grim didn't care. He didn't even have a gun on him. It hung on the wall behind, and it would take precious time for him to pick it up. As he smoked, I stood there in silence for a moment before he spoke. So how's the weather out there? Cold, and the blizzard shut down the roads, I told him, and I could see him silently swear to himself. But I couldn't hear his voice. He continued to smoke as he sighed again. Did you disturb my circles outside the cabin? He asked, and a little voice in my head told me to lie to him. No, I just stepped over them, I said as he kept smoking before speaking to himself. That means she still can't find me here. That's good. Then he focused on me while he finally finished his pipe and he asked, So, are you going to kill me now, or are you going to try to drag me to the law? He asked me and I kept my gun trained on him. I want you to come with me willingly. Yeah, I'm not doing that. You leave me no choice, I said as I aimed my gun at his heart, and he only laughed again. Go on ahead. Do what you need to do. Doesn't matter to me in the end. Grim said as I cocked my pistol, and he raised his pipe to me like he was doing a toast with the pipe. The gunshot was loud, and he slumped forward, his heart left on the wall behind him. He was dead, and even though I didn't want him to die, I didn't feel bad about killing him. So I dragged his stinking corpse outside of the cabin, and I brought it to my wagon. Leaving his body inside of the wagon, I began to make my trek down the mountain, pulling the cart, because the weather was too bad for any horse to make its way up the mountain. That night, I made a fire where I could watch his body, and as I ate my jerky, I watched as his corpse twitched and he stood up in the wagon. While I sat there, dumbfounded, he cracked his back, stretching, and looked at me again. "Oh, you're still here? Funny, I thought you'd get the marshal. You really are earning this bounty. I don't suppose you have spare tobacco? It seems you left my pipe behind," he said as I raised my shaking gun up at him, and he sighed. "Okay, I can see why you're not understanding. So let me make this simple. Don't bother. I am immortal. Any wounds you inflict on me will heal within a day, at most. You cannot kill me, and eventually I will kill you. I let you get your free shot because even I know about Charon, the bounty hunter who gives his bounties a chance. So fair is fair. Let me go, and I will keep making my way west. I will find the land further west than the sun can set, and you can keep on living. Sound good?" Grim offered as I fired another shot, this time blasting a hole in his right eye. The wound in his chest was healed over, but before he fell, he said one thing. "Fuck," as he fell back into the wagon. And now I was in a place where I had to make a choice. If he kept coming back to life, I would have to keep killing him. I only had so many bullets, and who knew if I could keep him from killing me long enough to get him to prison. If I had chains, I could keep him tied up, but I didn't have any. And if he recovered from all his wounds, I couldn't keep him down. But then I saw my hatchet, the same hatchet I used for cutting wood, and I had an idea. Something based on an old Argivian myth about the Hydra. So I placed the head of the hatchet in the fire, and I waited for it to be red hot before I tried my new plan. When Grim woke up the next morning, he screamed. I wasn't able to bind him by his limbs, so I decided to relieve him the trouble of his limbs. And just like the Argivian myth, the fire-tempered hatchet cauterized the wounds. So they did not heal. He was alive again, but his skin only healed over the wounds of his arms and legs. He was left without arms and legs, and his stubs flailed while I pulled the wagon to town. "Sorry, Grim, this is the only way to bring you back alive," I told him while he begged and wept in the wagon. Any trace of the confident man who laughed at death yesterday died when his heart restarted. Now desperate, he tried to threaten, he tried to beg, he tried to promise me anything to get me to bring him back to his cabin. He promised me wealth all morning. He told me he had hidden treasures all over the world. He would give me all of their locations and let me inherit all the wealth, if only I would stop and bring him back to his cabin. I ignored him. Even if he was telling the truth, the wealth was a lot more work than the wealth I was going to earn by turning him in. When noon came, he stopped promising me wealth and began promising me power. He told me he had connections with powerful people. He told me he could make me as powerful as the Emperor, or that I could rule over all I saw if only I stopped and leave him behind to try and crawl away. I refused to listen. I knew he was lying because if he was that powerful, then he would never have had a bounty on his head to begin with. When the evening came, he finally promised he would teach me how to be immortal. He told me he would make it so I would be invulnerable to harm, that I would watch every sunset and see every sunrise. All I had to do was leave the wagon behind, and he would make me immortal before the sun rose. This I heard, but I did not accept. I had seen his immortality, and if he could be captured, so could I. That was not an existence I wanted, or at least that was not an existence I wanted when he offered it. That night, in the fire's warm light, I could hear him whimpering in the wagon, half mad from thirst and hunger, while he kept telling himself, "She's coming, she's coming." I didn't bother asking him who was coming. I figured it would just be another reason to try and get me to let him go. That night, though, a strange traveler sat by my fire. We walked from the woods, and as she approached, Grim's whimpers became wails, and the woman walked towards me. She was barefoot in the cold winter night, and she had a thin white dress with no sleeves, with long dark hair that flowed behind her. In one hand she had a torch that burned in the night and seemed to be her only light. In her other hand she had a scroll, and around her neck was a silver chain with an iron key at the end. As she asked me, "May I share your fire, stranger?" she asked, and I welcomed her to it, figuring she must be freezing, and she sat in the fire's warm embrace when she finally spoke. "I see you caught Grim. Truly impressive. I've been looking for him for a very long time, and if you please, I would like to collect him." He asked me, and I grabbed at my gun. "I'm not giving up this bounty," I warned her, and she laughed. Her laugh was haunting. It was like a bell in a graveyard. You never wanted to hear it, but when you hear it, you can never stop hearing it. "I'm not interested in the bounty. In fact, I will even pay you a bounty for your hard work. You can keep his body. I just want his soul," she told me, and I relaxed some. "And you are what? A devil?" "No, not a devil, but you could call me a demon." "Why do you want his soul?" "It is long past his time to move on. He has kept himself hidden from my view for too long. I saw you move the rocks and showed me where he was. However, you met him long before I got there, and you brought death to him. So his soul is yours to do with as you please." "What would I want to do with his soul?" I asked the demon, who tilted her head, and for a moment in the snow it looked like two pure white wings unfurled behind her, making her look like a maskless angel before she answered. "I suppose you could torture it, keep it, sell it, bargain with it, or even just let it go if you're so charitable. But I am here to collect it. He has judgment to face, and to get him from you, I have to negotiate. I cannot simply take him, not without offering you something first, and not without you agreeing first." "Why can't you just take him if you are death?" "Why? Because it's the way of things. Death has to have a cause. Death cannot simply happen." "Could you release him to me in exchange for nothing?" "Yes, but I have to offer something to you first, and you can either accept it or you can refuse it. But there has to be an exchange," the woman in white told me as I asked. "And what is it you offer me?" I asked her, and her smile grew more predatory. "A year of life," she told me, and I shrugged. What is an extra year worth to me? I don't know how long I have to live. I could live for 100 years easily. And what is 101 years compared to 100? I asked her, and she shook her head slowly. Oh, sweet, innocent Charon, you don't have 100 years. You don't have 100 months. You don't have 100 days. You don't have 100 hours. You don't have 100 minutes. You don't even have 100 seconds left without my intervention, she said to me. What do you mean? I asked her. She pointed to where I was sitting, and I saw that I wasn't sitting on a log. I was ghostly pale and sitting on myself. My lips were blue, bloody bubbles were blowing from my nose and mouth, and if it wasn't for the small rise of my chest, I would have thought myself dead. I turned back to the woman, and I saw that the fire was dead. The only light was her torch, and I could see that even though she wore white, and she indeed had white wings behind her, her shadow was a horned being that stood even taller than the trees. We're freezing to death. You die in little over a minute. If you want to live, you can agree to let me claim his soul, and I will gladly give you an extra year of life. You can claim your monetary bounty, and you can accept your mortality in a year's time, or negotiate with me again. If you find that a year of life for a soul isn't to your liking, you are welcome to ask me for something else. However, be quick, because if you don't have a satisfactory deal, I will take your soul upon your death, and I will claim Grimm anyway. Her ultimatum finished, she sat in silence while my thoughts rushed. Was there a way out of this? No, there couldn't be. I was choking on my own blood, and I was freezing. I could either die here, or I could continue. Desperate, I agreed to the demon's terms. I will live for an extra year, and you can take Grimm's soul, I said, reaching my hand out for her, and she shook it. Her grip was so cold it burned, and the mark on my hand is still there to this day. You have a deal, Charon, and if you ever want to negotiate again, just call out my name to the fire. What is your name? I asked, only for her to vanish in a flurry of snow, and the fire started again. Her voice echoed among the trees. Vanth, the echoes said, as I moved, and I found myself no longer a ghost over my body, but now a person again, chilly but alive. Grim was very still in the wagon, and I knew Vanth was as good as her word. She had given me a year of life. Just a year. When I turned in Grim's body, I was given my check, but it hardly felt real. I finally had to process my mortality. Not just the fact that I nearly died, and I had a second chance, but now I had a secret that many men have killed for. I had the secret to eternal life. I just had to call out the demon's name, and I had to ask for it, although I was certain she would want something for it, and I didn't want to risk it. Not then, at least. As time went on, and I enjoyed my wealth as I traveled across Aslan, I was aware of my encroaching death. Few men ever know the date of their death, and I did. I could have accepted it and just died in peace. Instead, what I faced was the knowledge that I could do something about it. So a mere 3 months after meeting Vanth, I made another campfire, alone. I called out her name in the spring night air. She appeared across from me, behind the flames, and she asked, I see you want more life. Most wait a longer time, some wait until their last moments before trying to negotiate for more life. I prefer doing it this way. It gives time for better contracts. What can a man with 60 seconds left in his life offer a psychopomp like me? They can offer you the soul of another man, I told her, and she laughed at my cleverness. Clearly, she was not used to dealing with men who weren't panicking. Too right, but a man with time can do things a man without time cannot. So what is it you want? She asked, and I asked for the obvious thing. I want more life. A year isn't enough for me. I want more time, I told her, and she sighed like she expected that answer. Ah, yes, more life. The one thing everyone asked for from death. However, life has to be earned, I am afraid. While I do let people borrow time, I do not like doing that. Borrowed time gets paid back with interest. So what can you offer for more time? You mentioned that Grim was hidden from you? Surely there are more souls out there that are hidden from you, I asked, and I could see in her eyes that she was intrigued. So I was right. Grim wasn't a unique case. There were a lot of Grims out there. So, is that what you offer me? You're going to be a little bounty hunter for death? Sending souls to death to buy your soul more time? He asked, and I nodded. Wow. Well, I guess that couldn't be done, but we need to establish some rules, she told me, and I listened, intrigued. They cannot be any souls. They need to be souls that escaped judgment. I don't want you massacring innocent towns for centuries of life. I will either give you their name, or you will find escaped souls, such as the undead and ghosts. And each soul needs to be turned in to me before you get your year of life, she said, and I nodded, understanding what she was saying. So far, it was all reasonable. However, bear in mind, though I can give you life, I cannot give you invulnerability. I may stay Heim's hand, however, I cannot stop all wounds. If you are killed, you will owe me a greater debt to live again, and you don't want to owe death a debt, she said, reaching her hand out to me, and I in return shook her hand, accepting my place as a bounty hunter of death, a role I still play even now.